Wimberley Lions Club presents a forum on the future of public parks in Hays County. Whether you care about conservation, outdoor recreation, or simply the future of the hill country, this is your invitation to Katherine Sturdivant's talk, Balancing Conservation and Community.
Hays County is growing rapidly, faster than almost anyone expected. And with that growth comes a big question. How do we preserve the natural beauty and character of this place while still making room for the future? One of the most exciting answers to that question is happening right here near Wimberley. Many of you are familiar with the land off Devil's Backbone that used to be the Boy Scout Cell Rancho SEMA camp. That property is now being transformed into what will become the Sentinel Peak Preserve, a new kind of county park that's focused on conservation, education, and carefully managed public access. But that project is just one piece of a much larger story. Hays County has been expanding and rethinking its entire park system, balancing recreation, environmental protection, and the needs of a fast-growing population. To help us understand that big picture and what it means for our community, we're fortunate to have with us today Katherine Sturdivant, the Parks Education Coordinator for Hays County. Katherine has a BA in Anthropology from LSU and an MS in Geography from Texas State University. She's worked with the Parks Department for nearly a decade. Her passion for the outdoors began in vacant lots, campgrounds, and the woods behind her house. After college, she moved back home to Texas, where she joined the Texas Conservation Corps and built hiking trails in state parks for a year. On a whim, and with some newfound knowledge of chainsaws, she applied to the Hays County Parks Department. She landed the job, and now she gets to share her passion with you and others. She will walk us through the vision, the challenges, and the opportunities ahead, not for just this new preserve, but for the entire parks system. There will be a question and answer period after her presentation. Please join me in welcoming Katherine Sturdivant.
And I'm going to be talking to you guys today a little bit about the Hays County Parks and Natural Resources Department and how we're balancing conservation and community in this department, which I'm going to tell you guys today is a little bit difficult, but a lot of fun as well. So a little bit about me. That introduction was amazing, and it covered most of the highlights of my life. I was a military brat. My father was in the Air Force, and so we moved around pretty frequently. I've been blessed enough to live everywhere from North Dakota to Hawaii, which is pretty exciting. I was frequently outdoors exploring the woods behind my house, that vacant lot next door, or on camping trips with my family every summer up in the mountains, where I was really finding a passion for the outdoors. And as soon as I graduated high school, I got a job as a tour guide at Natural Bridge Caverns, where I started learning about the geology of Central Texas, and I got a lot of practice doing public speaking. From there, I made my way over to Louisiana. My family's from there, and I wanted to get back home, and so I joined LSU, got my undergrad in anthropology, and moved back to Texas because it was just a little bit too wet for me there. When I moved back, I joined the Texas Conservation Corps, and like Richard said, I got pretty decent on a chainsaw, decent enough to get a job here at the Hays County Parks Department. And looking back now, it's been almost 10 years doing this job, which I really, really, really love. And I'm grateful to be here. During that time, Hays County supported me on my journey to get a master's in geography from Texas State University. I got my master's studying the environmental advocacy of breweries in Central Texas, but we can talk about that later. And all of that brought me here on this journey where I'm incredibly interested in humans and the environment and how these two interact. And I've gotten to witness a whole lot of really cool things here in the department doing exactly that. Let's see. So let me tell you a little bit about us. This department was initially created back in 1973 when Hays County got its first park, 5 Mile Dam Park. A portion of that was given over to the county, and that's where it all began. Of course, I didn't start back then, but I did join the team in 2017. And up in the top left, you can see that's our very first group photo I took on the team. I was a 6th person on the department, and it was a pretty small crew, but as you can see to the right, up the top right corner, that's our most recent group photo. There's about 20 of us now. There are a few more positions on the team. I've got a few more coworkers to help me do the job. And between the 20 of us, we're managing over 740 acres of public land that's accessible to the public. There's a lot more that we're working on, but right now, 740 acres are open that you can explore right now. And I'm hoping that in a couple of years, that number will be closer to about 1,300 as we open several large parks and preserves down the line. We've got a lot of priorities, and I could be here torturing you guys all night, really, just telling about what we do in the department. But some of our main priorities, really, number one, are to provide recreation opportunities for y'all, for residents of Hays County. These parks are for you guys, and y'all voted to do this. Back in 2020, when the Parks Bond was passed, Hays County residents overwhelmingly supported the need for more parks, preserves, and open spaces here in Hays County. And so that's what we're doing. We have noticed that time spent outdoors in nature promotes physical and mental well-being, and it also helps a lot of other things. What we're also doing is helping to protect water quality, water quantity as it recharges into the groundwater system. We're hoping to preserve habitat, not only to prevent it from being fragmented, but also provide habitat for endangered species like the golden-cheeked warbler. In our mission, we're also hoping to improve community resilience to threats like drought and flood by improving our floodplains and making them more functional. And we're doing a whole lot more. Some of the tools that we use to accomplish these goals include using these conservation easements. A lot of our projects are funded through the 2020 Parks Bond, but we also couldn't do what we do without a lot of partnerships. And so throughout the presentation today, I'm going to be mentioning a lot of organizations, although this isn't an exhaustive list. We work with a lot of different groups, nonprofits, and other organizations to do what we do, because just 20 of us alone really isn't enough to accomplish things at the end of the day. All right. Do y'all remember the 2020 Parks Bond? Yeah? So back in 2020, we had a vote to vote on the Parks and Open Spaces Bond. There had not been an Open Spaces or Parks Bond since 2007. And so 2020 was a really exciting year, and the Parks Bond passed with nearly 70% of voters. You guys, our Hays County voters, voted to expand parks, preserves, and natural areas, add more open space to Hays County, and set aside about $75 million to do this. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how we've been using some of this funding. There were some additional funding sources available that were added in. You can see those up there. Some funding came from the Hays County Roads Bond, as well as from the American Rescue Plan Act, some of those smaller portions. That very same year in 2020, a group was formed, the Parks and Open Spaces Advisory Committee, or POSAC. Does that word sound familiar to some of y'all? POSAC was this large group that got together and started evaluating parks projects. Over 30 projects were evaluated, and ultimately quite a few of them were settled on to use Parks Bond funding to support. Now, some of the support varied across projects. Some of these projects are within Hays County under our supervision. Some of these projects were under the auspices of various city government here in Hays County. Some of the funding was used to purchase land. Some of that funding was used to purchase conservation easements on the land, which protect it. And some of that funding was used to design plans, development plans, or open space visitation plans for these parks. So don't think of all of this money as being used to purchase land. Some of it was used to facilitate or support these projects in other ways, however we could. There's a map up here on the screen, which there's a lot going on up here, but all I want y'all to focus on are these little dots on the left side. Those are all the locations of Parks Bond projects. There are over 30 of them here on this map. To the right, you'll see a long list of some of these projects. Some of them are complete, some of them are in various stages of being complete. Those in green highlight are parks and open spaces that are under the control of Hays County that you can go out and see right now or one day. Those highlighted in yellow are ones that we do not necessarily own, but we have a conservation easement over to protect those properties because they've been identified as being in need of protection, either habitat-wise or to protect groundwater recharge. You'll notice that there are quite a few projects that are yet to be complete, which means over the next few years, you'll likely be seeing and hearing about many more of these projects as they come online and begin to go under construction or start their work in various ways. So you guys have a lot to look forward to over the next few years. Can y'all raise your hands for me? Who's heard of a conservation easement? Okay, we're good on this one. So conservation easements are a really great tool that we use to do what we do. We don't necessarily always purchase the land that a conservation easement is placed over, though sometimes the Parks Bond funding is used to help purchase the easement. These conservation easements are a very flexible document that allow landowners to surrender certain land uses or activities on the land while preserving some of the natural and historic character. Oftentimes, almost always, these easements require a conservation purpose as its main purpose. And here in Hays County, often we are placing easements on the land to protect groundwater recharge, both quantity and quality, as well as protecting habitat, again, protecting it from fragmentation, but also preserving unique land that is ideal habitat for endangered species like the golden-cheeked warbler. Several of our properties that we own, several that are open to the public right now, have conservation easements on them. And moving forward, many of our preserves and open spaces, like Sentinel Peak Preserve, will contain conservation easements as well. Now, these easements are a binding legal agreement between the landowner, sometimes us or a private entity, and a land trust, which holds that document secure. And some of the easements, some of the land trusts that we work with include the Nature Conservancy, the Hill Country Conservancy, and Save Our Springs. All three of these are ones that hold easements on county land, but these are by no means the majority of easements or land trusts that exist out there. There are plenty across the state and across the country as well. One of the other tools that helps us out is the Hays County Regional Habitat Conservation Plan. That is a mouthful, but it is basically a plan in place to allow for development while also preserving habitat. It is that balance, balancing conservation and community. What these plans do is they look towards the future. They look towards the plans of inevitable development, and they see what habitat can be preserved and what can be minimized or mitigated while development is taking place. One of the things that Hays County does is assist in enrolling landowners and some of our own properties into the Regional Habitat Conservation Plan in order to help protect habitat. Here in the county, the two main species of concern are the golden-cheeked warbler, as well as the black-capped vireo, which is not typically the main star in our parks and preserves. We're usually looking at the golden-cheeked warbler. And all of this program is administered by our natural resource coordinator. And here is a very brief look at that process on her end to get those landowners enrolled in the program. So a landowner would have to be wanting to develop in golden-cheeked warbler habitat. They would apply to the process to see how much they could afford to offset or mitigate. Once the county assesses and enrolls those landowners, they buy into a fund, they buy mitigation credits, which provide more funding for the county to purchase more preserved land and conservation easements. And this positive feedback loop that helps development happen while preserving some form of habitat. All right. And with that, we're going to move into talking about some of our preserves. I'm going to go really briefly over some of our parks and preserves, but we're going to talk a little bit more about Sentinel Peak Preserve because it's really exciting. But first we're going to chat a little bit about some of our other preserves, including Gay Ruby Dahlstrom Nature Preserve. By a show of hands, who's heard of this preserve? A couple of y'all? Excellent, yay! This is one that is not so frequently visited, but well worth the visit in my opinion. It is named for Gay Ruby Dahlstrom, the person who created the preserve, who came up with the idea. She lived out on this land in Buda. It was used as a game ranch, an exotic game ranch, and family land. And she spent decades out on that preserve, enjoying the land, walking the land, and soaking it all in. And looking at the increasing development in Hays County, Gay thought to herself, I sure would love to see this land preserved forever. And she did exactly that. In 2007, she began talks. By 2008, Hays County was involved. And together, Hays County, the City of Austin, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Hill Country Conservancy came together to put a conservation easement over her entire 2,200-acre ranch. This agreement was incredible because it was one of the first of its kind. It allowed for public access on a portion of that private land. Gay never made it to see the grand opening of the preserve. Groundbreaking was in 2018, and the official opening was in 2019. But today, people get to walk the land that still bears her name. Now, this was, like I said, it was first of its kind when it happened. There have been a lot more conservation easements that are similar, but at its time, this was one of the first. It allowed for public access on 384 acres of a privately owned ranch. Hays County would manage the operations, facilitate the public entrance, and also manage some of the wildlife management going on in the background on those 384 acres. The rest of the ranch would belong to the Dahlstrom family and would be protected in perpetuity. Why do it? This land is incredible for groundwater recharge. Numerous karst features dot the preserve, and dye tracing has shown that water entering the preserve exits Barton Springs in just 3 days. That's incredible. It is a really great preserve, dotted with karst features like you can see here, all on the landscape. Some of them no more than a fracture, others large enough for a human body to fit well inside of. And all of these features are conveying water down into our aquifer system and up to Barton Springs. Now, it's not always 3 days, but that's as quick as it could possibly go, which means that the water entering that land must go in clean. It's got to go in as clean as it can to exit those springs. And so part of that land is there to preserve quality and quantity of groundwater recharge in the Buda area. Now again, there were multiple parties involved with this property. We could not have done it alone. The Hill Country Conservancy holds the conservation easement over this property. And there are a lot of other groups that help us maintain the wildlife, maintain the preserve, and keep an eye on things out there. Let's see. This one's one you guys should all be a little familiar with. Jacob's Well Natural Area. Now this one predated the 2020 Parks Bond. It was acquired with funding from the 2007 Hays Parks Bond. And it was established in 2010 to protect the iconic Jacob's Well Spring. This photo in the bottom right, I absolutely love. It was taken back in 2017, 2018. It had to be during a swim season because you can see a few folks in bathing suits there in the background. This water level, unfortunately, I haven't seen in a few years either. But if you'll take a look at the top left before I move this slide, this photo at the top left is from back in the 1960s. And it shows that people have been adoring and exploring this spring for decades and decades. It's actually been thousands and thousands of years. And here's a photo of what it looks like more today. So Jacob's Well has looked a little more like this photo since 2022, although it has quit flowing a number of times in the past. Jacob's Well quit flowing for the very first time in recorded history in 2000. And this caused a lot of alarm here in Wimberley. For some of you guys, you might have lived here during that time, or you might have heard about it wherever you were living. And you might have heard kind of the racket people were making, wondering what was going on. We would see Jacob's Well quit flowing again in 2008, 2011, 2013. And then again in 2022, but this time was different. Instead of counting each time, Jacob's Well has just been at zero or close to low flow for about 4 years, going on 4 years, since about 2022. And we've kind of quit counting how many times Jacob's Well has quit flowing, unfortunately. I don't say all of this to bum you guys out, but part of why Jacob's Well Natural Area exists and part of why we do what we do is to try to protect flow from springs like Jacob's Well. Of course, we want to see Jacob's Well clean, clear, and flowing. It's not quite doing any of those right now, but we are hopeful that in the future we will see this again. Part of that hopefully has to do with our next preserve that we just recently opened, Karst Canyon Preserve. Karst Canyon Preserve just opened in March of 2026, and we opened to a huge grand opening. That photo on the bottom right there is a photo I took on the day of our grand opening. And I haven't seen that many people in our parks in a long time, not since Jacob's Well swim season, where it looked like that at Jacob's Well almost every single day, believe it or not. Karst Canyon Preserve is an incredible preserve, dotted with karst features. There are over 100 features that have been identified on the property, and all of these are contributing to groundwater recharge of the Trinity Aquifer. In addition, Karst Canyon Preserve has ideal habitat for the golden-cheeked warbler, who's been sighted numerous times along the trails and was even heard singing right above the ribbon cutting that day back in March. So this preserve was acquired not only to protect groundwater recharge, but as well as to preserve habitat. Now, this one is not an official federal golden-cheeked warbler preserve. It's not quite large enough, but it does protect their habitat and prevent it from being fragmented. As y'all all probably know, golden-cheeked warblers are kind of picky. They like to be in the quietest spaces there in that mix of oak and ash juniper, where they use the bark of the ash juniper to build their nests in those oak trees. And so seeing those two trees together in those nice quiet woodlands is ideal for a golden-cheeked warbler, as well as other bird species who've been sighted out there on the preserve. Karst Canyon Preserve is also home to the Wimberley Bat Cave. It's a large cave feature which transmits water down into the aquifer, but it also was once home to a fairly large species or colony of bat species. We believe that decades ago there was a large colony of Mexican free-tailed bats that called the Bat Cave home. And I personally am hopeful that we see them out there on the preserve again one day, but we'll just have to see about that. There are plenty of plans for Karst Canyon Preserve. This is not all that we've got going on out there. 2 miles have been completed so far, and another 2 miles are slated for completion in the coming years. We will also be debuting regular guided tours out there in the fall of this year, which I'm really excited about because I just love yapping. Let's see, and moving right along. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there is also a conservation easement over this property. Most of our preserves have one. This one is held by the Nature Conservancy, who also hold the easement over Sentinel Peak Preserve. Now, this preserve was acquired in another partnership. That's kind of the name of the game out here. The Watershed Association, formerly the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association, acquired this land back in 2019 and held on to it until funding was available to transfer this over to the county. This was a little over $4 million that was used from the Parks bond, and that purchase was completed back in 2025, at which point we took over operations and quickly worked to get everything ready on the ground to open for that grand opening back in March. All right, this is one of the last preserves I want to talk to you guys about before we get to Sentinel Peak Preserve. Has anybody had a chance to visit Limestone Lake yet? A couple of you guys? Excellent. Limestone Lake is one of the ones that's closest to my home over in San Marcos, Texas. This preserve was created for regional trail connectivity and also to preserve habitat. You can see some of that beautiful Spanish moss in that photo in the top right corner, which kind of reminds me of the areas of Louisiana that I spent a lot of time in. This preserve is about 102 acres, and it forms a critical link on the San Marcos Greenbelt. So one of those things we like to do is provide increased recreation opportunities for our Hays County residents. Well, there was a huge gap, about a mile long, in between River Recharge Natural Area and Ringtail Ridge there in San Marcos along the Greenbelt. Limestone Lake forms that link. It is now a 1-mile connector trail that allows residents to walk for miles from one side of San Marcos to the other and back again. This one also provides some really great biking opportunities. So does Cars Canyon, which we really didn't see too much of in Hays County prior to that. This is another exciting property that had a lot of people involved, including the San Marcos River Foundation, the Great Springs Project, as well as the San Marcos Greenbelt Alliance, who still help us maintain this trail system. And this was another one that was facilitated with the 2020 Parks Bond. A little over $2.5 million was used to secure the property as well as the trail that you see there. All right. There are a few other properties that I really didn't get to talk to you guys about today because we just simply don't have time. A personal favorite of mine is Winter's Mill Trail here in Wimberley. We did not see these bluebonnet blooms like you guys are seeing in that photo this year, but I'm really hopeful to see them again next year. It is one of the best places to see bluebonnets around here, in my opinion. And it's another one that's great for regional trail connectivity. It connects right into a really great park you guys have probably heard of, Blue Hole Regional Park, and links that one in with Wood Creek. So you can walk again for miles through Wimberley, which is amazing. We've also got another park funded from the Parks Bond called Capes Pond. Again, not yet open to the public, but this one is coming along in San Marcos right now. And this one is providing increased recreation opportunities for residents, hopefully some fishing. And lastly, Presa Grande in San Marcos, another upcoming preserve. Hopefully you guys will hear more about soon in the coming years. This one exists to protect groundwater recharge, as well as provide connectivity and habitat preservation. And you'll see that photo there in the bottom right. It is a really narrow corridor, but really biodiverse, really gorgeous, and I'm really hoping y'all can see that one too. And that brings us to Sentinel Peak Preserve, which might be why you guys came today, maybe just like hanging out with me. This is a really, really exciting property. I'm so happy that I'm finally here in front of you guys with information to tell y'all about it. As you can see from some of the photos, it is a gorgeous property. It is over 530 acres. It contains about a mile stretch of the Blanco River, which, to my knowledge, over the last few years has not quit flowing, even during this last pretty rough drought. It is slated for some low-impact swimming and water recreation, as well as hiking seasonally. And it is a federally protected preserve for the golden-cheeked warbler. You can see right there in that bottom right corner. Surveying is actively going on out of the property for golden-cheeked warblers. There is an annual monitoring requirement that takes place out there, and they've definitely been sighted there as well. The habitat is quite ideal for them. And right now, construction is actively taking place on the preserve. So, this used to be the Sam Houston Area Council of Scouts Boy Scout Camp, dating all the way back to the 1950s. Houston Scouts came over to Wimberley for decades and decades, exploring the hill country, swimming in the waters of the Blanco River, and hiking back up the hill every afternoon, up a hill that they used to call Appetite Hill, but that our trail is now named Diablo's Descent on. You can kind of get a feel for how rugged it is out there. After decades and decades of scouts spending time on the land, the Sam Houston Area Council of Scouts was starting to struggle through the 2010s, and the 2015 floods were kind of the last nail in the coffin out there, forcing the Scout Council to list the property for sale. This was not what a lot of people wanted to hear, but Hays County was able to acquire 530 plus acres to save as a preserve and also to welcome the public back onto for recreational opportunities. And There is a lot going on out there now, y'all. This here on the right is one of the old climbing structures that still dot the landscape. When we first got out to the preserve, there were buildings everywhere, including an archery range, a shotgun range, a cafeteria, cabins and tent pads everywhere, climbing structures, zip lines, man, everything out there. And we've done a lot of work to remove some of the more unsafe features from the preserve. Going back a second, do y'all see that ceiling fan photo in the middle there? That's what almost every single building looks like. Things had seen better days. The raccoons were really doing a number on the ceilings, and so were the ringtail cats. They were really thriving there in the roofs. And so there's been a lot of work to be done. Asbestos remediation has taken place. A lot of demolition has taken place of some of the insecure buildings that were starting to crumble. And in its place, construction has began, where a lot of money has been put back into turning this into a very lovely preserve. There are some really cool plans to build large buildings, large event spaces, and get you guys back out for water recreation as well as hiking. But there is a balance to be struck out here. Again, we're balancing that conservation and community. And so there's going to be portions of the preserve that will never be accessible to the public, that will be no access zones, that will simply be there to preserve the land. Multiple parties are involved in this preserve as well. The Nature Conservancy holds the easement over the land. Hayes and Comal counties collaborate on the project as portions of the preserve sit very close to the boundary line, and the main road into the preserve comes through Comal County to come into Hayes. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is there to sign off on a lot of this as well, as this is a federally protected golden cheek warbler preserve. Now, this of course means that there is a lot that's going to go on in the future. We are required to do annual surveys for golden cheek warblers to detect their presence and ascertain how well they're breeding. This monitoring must take place annually. Right now it is contracted out, but the goal is that this will be done by members of the Hayes County Parks and Natural Resources Department in the future. Invasive species will need to be removed, unfortunately. If anybody likes pulling weeds and knows what I mean when I say there's bastard cabbage everywhere, pardon my French, that and the Maltese star thistle will need to be tackled. And so invasive species removal will be ongoing in the future. Again, there will be protected non-access zones where the public will never get to go. This land will be meant to preserve that habitat for the golden-cheeked warbler. But there will be plenty of space for you guys. There are plans for a visitor center, event spaces, native gardens, as well as other stations for park staff, including offices and meeting spaces. Currently, there are several miles of trail complete on the property. There will be seasonal access to these hiking trails outside of the golden-cheeked warbler time period. So from about March through August, there will be very limited access on the preserve. We'll have you guys off the hiking trails to provide those warblers the space they need to go through their breeding season. However, we're looking at guided tour access during that time, very small, very low impact. Throughout the year, we are hoping to see year-round, low-impact water recreation in the form of targeted swimming areas that preserve the riparian zone there along the river, as well as access for fishing, kayaking, canoeing, and swimming. Now again, that portion of the Blanco has never ceased flowing in these last few years. It is assisted by several large springs that sit upstream, including a spring flowing off of the John Knox Ranch Preserve. And the water there in the middle is about 8 feet deep, so it's pretty perfect for jumping in on those hot summer days. Now, access to the preserve will be limited. We do have to balance, again, our conservation and our community here. And so we will be enforcing a maximum capacity out on the preserve, likely to the tune of about 60 adults. This is not set in stone, but a minimal amount to where we can minimize both the amount of humans and cars that are out there on the preserve. Still working on some of those finer details. All of this to say, we've got a lot going on here in Hays County, and it's a balance that we're striking every day between community and conservation. Development will continue because, let's face it guys, this is an amazing place to live. Hays County is beautiful, the schools are wonderful, the people here, the smiling faces I'm seeing in front of me are some of the nicest I've ever encountered. Who wouldn't want to move here? But there's got to be a balance, and so we are looking towards that future, providing space for our visitors and our citizens to recreate, while also planning to still provide groundwater recharge and adequate habitat for the species that belong here. Looking forward, we know development will happen, but we do know that there's a way to balance all of that. All right, well, before I leave you guys today, I just want to tell y'all that you've been a wonderful audience. I'm going to be sending this PowerPoint over so that it can be dispersed amongst y'all if you'd like to refer back. There are a lot of useful links right here at the end that refer to some of the things I mentioned today. I would absolutely encourage y'all to go check out some of those Hays County Parks Bond projects and see what else is kind of coming down the pipe, so to speak, here in Hays County, because there's a whole lot going on. I want to say thank you guys for having me out today. I haven't gotten to speak to the Lions now.